Welcome to the Gravity Leadership Podcast. Gravity Leadership is a growing network of people who believe the center of the Christian life is the love of God revealed in Jesus Christ, and that learning to take love seriously is vital for how we practice discipleship, mission, and leadership. The Gravity Leadership Podcast explores, in practical ways, how to root our lives and our leadership in this love that holds all of us and everything together.
Hey everybody, welcome again to the Gravity Leadership Podcast. Again, if you are a longtime listener, I guess maybe this could be your first time listening to the Gravity Leadership Podcast. If it is, well, welcome. My name is Ben Sternke. I'm one of your hosts. I'm here with two other co-hosts, my partners in crime.
No.
That's kind of like a colloquialism, but it sort of feels illicit. Sort of like,
Yeah, there's nothing illegal happening here.
there's nothing illegal happening.
We've
We're
paid
just
for all
talking.
this equipment.
All good things, all good things.
We're not using a VPN.
It's free
from
to put a
China.
podcast on the internet. It's just fine.
Right.
Everything's fine.
Right.
Anyway, Matt Tebby is with me. Hey, Matt.
Hello.
How was it going?
Hi. Hey, good, Ben. Thanks for having me.
Good, except for your sinus infection. You were telling us about this.
I cannot get over it.
Yeah. Try not to complain about it, but it's sort of all-consuming
Yeah.
when it
just a little
hurts,
headache.
when your head hurts.
Little headache,
Yeah.
but I'm here.
Okay. And Christy Penley, hi.
Hey.
Christy is finishing her last paper of the semester.
Woohoo! Yeah, demon semesters are different, so they don't normally run. So mine goes until next week. So I'm
Okay.
finishing my last paper, and then I start another semester in like 2 weeks. I have
right.
1 week off.
Boy.
And then then you'll be possessed by a demon.
Oh
What?
my
Right?
goodness.
Demon?
No,
Have you guys
I'll
ever
be
made demon jokes? Demon?
Oh,
demon?
boy.
Yes, many people have.
Yeah, well, it's kind of, I think of it every single time somebody says
I'm
they're doing a
sure you
demon.
do.
I was like, I don't know if that's a good idea. Demons
I have
are
one-
bad.
No, I have 1 more year of classes with no demons. So
No demons. Good.
All right.
Angels only. Holy Spirit only. All right. Well, good friends. It's great to be with you again. If you are, I want to just plug our curated links email to you. If you are not on our list, go ahead and sign up at gravityleadership.com/join. You can join our online community and get our curated links. We send them out every Friday. We're recording this on a Friday, and so we just sent out those links. We were on a retreat earlier this week, Matt, you and I, with other staff members at our church. And what I sent out in the links this morning was one of the exercises we did on this retreat, which is a really helpful exercise for naming your desires, naming your wants, and kind of doing that in community. Because there's a lot to discern there, I think, in terms of what we want for the future, what we're afraid of in the future, all of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was excited just to name that for people, name that helpful exercise for folks. And then we link to articles that have been helpful for us and as we navigate leadership and faith in the modern world. So
Yeah. Parenthetically,
Anyway.
I'm preaching on this Sunday.
You're preaching on
Desires.
curated links?
Yeah.
Oh, desires.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That's another thing we do. You're leading a preaching cohort, isn't it, Matt?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We train people to preach kind of short proclamations of good news.
Yeah.
Do you have your good news proclamation? You're preaching from James 3.
I'm working on it, Ben.
And 4.
This is some
Working
pressure.
on it. You've texted it at me a couple
Yeah,
times.
this is from James.
it's not Sunday morning yet. So.
Yeah, it'll
true.
change. This is from James
It'll
3,
morph.
though. And I'm declaring we're invited into the hard work of making peace together. And it's made as each one of us owns our desires, submits them to Christ, and learns how to do it in community. Let us resist the devil and learn to make peace this day.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited about that. We did a little peacemaking then on this retreat because we named and owned our desires for the future.
Yeah, because James says the reason why you guys are murdering each other and coveting is because you've got these passions that are at war within you, and you have selfish ambition and bitter jealousy that's running the show, rather than pure, peaceable, willing to yield, gentle, sincere, honestness.
Yeah. That's bad news, and that stuff runs the show unless you can own it and name it in a safe community.
Parenthetically, this is what we do in our And this is a parenthetical to my parenthetical.
Inside the parentheses that we're already inside,
If we had
there's
an
another
editor
one
for
that's
this
beginning now.
podcast, they would totally draw a line.
They'd
to
be
this
like,
whole
this
segment.
is a run-on sentence.
Yeah, but that's what we do in our Gravity Leadership Academies as well. The entire
Yes.
work of the Christian life is to tend to God where we really are and to reckon with what we want. And we do not have the capacity or competency in general in the Christian West to do that. And so we are attempting to architect, the spiritual and theological framework for us to do that and then train others to do that. So, yeah.
It's Matt, you're starting one of those cohorts this month. It's probably full.
Biggity bam. Yep.
But we're going to probably start one next month as well. We tend to start one a month.
So I actually have some people who are interested in one doing it over a lunch hour. So
Mountain
anyway.
time?
Mountain
Your lunch
time.
hour?
My
Okay.
lunch hour, which is like 2 Eastern time. But,
2 Eastern
just in
time.
case somebody's interested,
Yeah.
All right.
contact us.
Yeah.
Contact us. Yep. Just reach out. podcast@gravityleadership.com is our email address. We'd love to connect you with folks who can help you get plugged in. And also sign up for our curated links. That's just totally free. So I don't know why you wouldn't do
Yeah.
that.
It's a no-brainer, as they say.
Kind of like this podcast, totally free. All right. Well, friends, we have a interview we got to introduce today with Lisa Colon DeLay. Did I pronounce that middle part of her name
We'll find out
correctly?
because she says it on the podcast. And people will just listen to that as her correcting you
Okay,
in
good.
real time.
Fantastic.
Yeah, this
Good. I'm happy to
The
be
Wild
corrected.
Land Within. This book is one of 2 books that we've talked to recently. Bethany Heiser was the other one. Dearborn Heiser was the other one that I think is an incredible companion to our cohorts. I mean, this book summarizes a lot of the influences and theological and historical streams that we use in GLA. So it was a delight to talk to Lisa, and her book is really, really good.
Yeah. Yep. It's great. And right at the end, when we say to her, like, hey, how can people reach out to you? She's the first person on like a lot of episodes of our podcast. Let me look here. This is episode episode 200,
What?
guys.
Come on.
This is the 200th episode of our podcast. I had no idea.
Hey, do you have those sound effects you can play? Can you play one of those sound effects?
Oh.
Do you have your board
Oh, boy.
available?
Keep using, just do
Hold
it
on, let me
like
try.
a
Let me try.
4-year-old.
Oh, that was the wrong one. Shoot.
That's not the one we wanted for
Okay,
They're
that was
laughing at us
correct
now,
there
though.
for the.
No,
Okay, now they're laughing at us. Let's try this one. There we go.
Okay, they're
200
cheering.
episodes.
Yes, woohoo!
Thank you very
Finally.
much, everybody. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Maybe it'll just
Anyway,
take
200
200 more
episodes, that's good.
episodes for you to become a droid at the sound machine.
I just haven't labeled my buttons, and so we never use them.
my.
So, anyway, it's a great book. Oh, what was I was
You
going
were
to say?
saying at the end,
At
she's
the end,
first.
when she says, how can you reach out
Yeah.
to Lisa? She's the first person in 200 episodes to give us a P.O. box, and you can write her a letter.
She loves pen pals.
She loves pen pals, so
That's
she'll
so
write
great.
you. She'll write you a letter if you write her. If you write her a letter. So anyway, the address is in the show notes, and also she talks about it at the end of the.
But
podcast.
first, listen. See if you want to write her. I mean, you may listen to
Yeah,
this
yeah,
and
see if
think,
you
I'm not
wanna
going to
write
write
that.
that lady. But you might
I'm
listen and
confident
be like,
you're gonna
this
want
is the
to,
kind of
'cause this is
lady
great.
I want to write. And if
Yeah.
she is the kind of lady you like to write, well,
Yeah.
we have a P.O. box for you.
we do available right in the show notes and at the end of the.
We should get
episode.
right into this.
We should. We
No.
should. Anything more to say, Christy?
no,
you have the
I
last
think
word.
you need to go into it.
Thank you.
You are cut
Always
off,
happy
young
to be
man.
corrected. Yeah.
Lisa Colon DeLay, welcome to the Gravity Leadership Podcast.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, Lisa is a teacher, spiritual director, and hosts her own podcast, Spark My Muse. She's originally from Puerto Rico, and she's a master's in spiritual formation. And she's written a book we're talking about today called The Land Within, Cultivating Wholeness Through Spiritual Practice. Lisa, is there anything else we need to know about you before we jump into our convo?
the book is called The Wild Land Within.
Oh, what did I say? Did I say The Land Within?
Yeah, it's I get tongue tied with it too. I wound up originally it was going to be called like The Land of Wild Things because I was thinking about including like Maurice Sedek's book, the book I loved as a child. And so I will wind up occasionally just calling it that. It was like, it hasn't been called that for years, but it's The Wild Land Within. And it talks about, the subtitle is Cultivating Wholeness Through Spiritual Practice, but it's not really a book about spiritual practices. It does include a spiritual practice every chapter at the end of 9 chapters, but it really is about healing and understanding what I call the inner world, the unseen world, and understanding that God is within those places and that there's climate and weather systems in those unknown, semi-known and known places inside. And the more we get familiar with those areas, the more we can heal and relate to others and God better.
Yeah. Well, we've done over 200 podcasts. This is the first one where I've mispronounced the name of the book. And the font on the cover of the book is, I don't know what, 25 font. So it's like 25. So we never restart. We never re-record. So we'll just leave that in perpetuity. Lisa, maybe give us an introduction to who you are. How did you become so interested in the wild land within?
Yeah, probably because my own understanding of myself felt like it was so muddled and confusing. My background is one of sort of cradle Christianity. My parents met in seminary in a really conservative, fundamentalist Baptist seminary. And so it was something I couldn't avoid: spirituality, religion, all of that, for good and bad. There was spiritual abuse, but also I always loved Jesus, and that's what carried me through. And so I was doing deconstruction, as an 8-year-old, kind of over and over again, deconstructing, reconstructing, trying to figure out who is this that we say, who is this God? When we speak about God, what are we talking about? What do we mean? And people mean different things, very different things.
Yes.
And found out I had a lot of idols that seemed like God, weren't God. Most of the things I was presented, I don't think are actually God. And so I actually wind up feeling a real compassion and an empathy with atheists, because I feel like I'm an atheist of a lot of the gods that I was taught about. I'm definitely can get that. And I feel like I've moved much more towards mystery, much more away from God as male, not that God is female, but that God is mysterious, and also Father, and also Shepherd, and all the rest of the things. Yes. And just trying to get to understand who God was through the person of Jesus. I went to seminary. I really think it was originally in my mind, I thought, this is so I can write for Christians. I want to see how I can write to help people heal and understand the Bible, perhaps, and learn some of the original languages that are dead now. And I really felt that God wanted to show me who God was. And there was a lot of healing that took place. And I was introduced to people outside of my tradition. And I started reading the Catholic writers, started learning about the breadth of Christian history. The Desert Fathers made a huge, huge impact on me. And then I realized, wow, there's just this thing that I've known, this American, Western, modern Christianity of America, is really different than this Eastern early stuff. This is incredible. And not to throw the one away, but to just add to it and realize a lot of the things that I think are Christian are American, essentially, or that are white centered. And I wanted to kind of take people along on the journey that I've been on. And the book is really probably 10 years in the making. So that's why it's full of a lot of different things, is because I pulled all these things together from over the years. And I wanted to give people an idea of a richer, especially Americans, of a richer idea of Christianity through 2,000 years instead of maybe the last 500. And that's kind of, this book is part of my own journey and just kind of sharing that.
Yeah. So this book is basically kind of notes from your journey that helped you gain access to, and in some places you talk about facing and befriending these different places within us, different experiences we have. And so what you're doing is, and that was one of the things that struck me as I read this, Lisa, that you actually give a decent amount of like context and history and tracing different things in a really brief amount of space. So it's like you're able to do a lot of work in a short period of time, and it's impressive. I think it shows your giftedness as a writer. But what you're doing then basically is taking all the gold that you were able to mine out in your own life and then offer it to us as well. Yeah? Is that what I hear you saying?
Yeah, I think that's a fair estimate, as well as just trying to speak in terms of what is very real, maybe the most real part of us that is also unseen, that sometimes we're not brave enough or take the time enough because we're too busy to really look at. So we all have fears of the wounds that we know maybe a little bit about, or maybe we don't know about. And those are tender spots and we don't want to necessarily go into them. And what I want to say is that, they're there whether you like it or not. So I talk about befriending our fears. I talk about doing this book not as self-help. So as Christians, we're people of a community, people of a historic event, and that we do this book at least with one other person we can trust, perhaps a trauma-informed therapist or a spiritual director, or just a trusted friend who we know will journey with us. And that is a really important piece to this, because some of it is going to be triggering perhaps, and that you read it slowly. People who've done this in book groups have told me that they haven't experienced something like this before, and they wouldn't want to do it alone, because you just like you wouldn't want to go roughing it for a month out in the wilderness alone, in the real wilderness. You don't want to do this sort of book alone either. It's not like a quick, easy read. It's, you got to take your time with it, and you got to pour through it a little bit and do your due diligence of looking at some of the places it invites you to go into. And, I try to be pretty honest with people. If you want like a pep talk book that'll make you feel good and yay, it's probably not the book for you. But if you're interested in feeling accompanied as you go through some difficult terrain and some kind of a reckoning in certain ways, and also just to feel like you're not alone, then it's probably more of a book for you. But I've been asked to do this as a Sunday school class in my church, and I don't think I will. I just think it's better as a small group book, and it's better for people who are like not just your general audience, but like people like you. Are you ready to maybe go to some difficult places at times? Okay, then we can do it. But a general Sunday school class, I think they'll drop off like flies.
Lisa, I think that there's something really powerful about going through something like this in community, because you need to be in a place where you trust people and you can be trusted, a place where vulnerability is safe, those types of things. I'm curious to hear, since this book is kind of 10 years of your life, did you process in the midst of your life as you were going through this, did you process that with people in a community?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't do it alone. I also have I over problem solve. I'm not ashamed to say I'm on anti-anxiety medication. I've had trauma, and that has made my brain overthink and try to think its way out of bad things that have happened, right? So I need people as reference points that are thinking slower than I am. I need people who are trauma informed. I have had companions that are spiritual friends for decades, and we regularly meet to basically do life together, to take walks, have coffee, and talk about the serious and the fun things of life, that it's not based on problems like trauma therapy might be based on pathologies or problems. It's just based on regular life. And so working through some of these, and that's why I thank people in the back. Some of those people I thank in the back I've known for decades of my life, and it's all part of it. How I know that I've been able to work through some injuries is because I've seen how it works out in real life. I'm not wondering or not guessing at it. It's actually been part of my own healing process.
That's so good. Every year I pick a word, and this year I picked the Hebrew word tov, which it means good. In fact, I have it on a ring, like on my finger. But I had a group of women that I asked to come and be a part and to process life with me. And while there have been tears week after week, it has been the best group I've ever been a part of. And it's been so good. Like, that's why I named it the Tove group. And when my husband hears like, oh, you're meeting with your Tove friends, I'm like, yeah. And he's like, he knows that that is just goodness for me. Not easy, but good. So yeah, thank you
Makes
for
a
that.
huge difference, definitely. And it's really there was a friend of mine. This is like close to 25 years ago now, and I remember meeting with her, and she was newly married, and I was married a little bit longer than her, and her husband used to get a little jealous of our time together. And I said, just make sure you tell your husband that this is the best thing for his marriage that could happen, because I'm encouraging her in her marriage, and she's encouraging me in mine. And we're better off than when we go back. And we're like settled down, and everything's good, and we're like it's really healthy. This is one of the healthiest things she could do. And the people who don't have the support wind up going it alone and saying, I'm the only one. I guess I'll get a divorce because this isn't working out. So it's really great to have the trusted friends, and it takes years to build sometimes, and it doesn't always come naturally. And I'll have disagreements with my friends. It's not like it's all, cupcakes and sprinkles and stuff. It's just that you hang in there and you keep coming back over and over.
Tell your friend her husband needs to get his own group, right? He can start his own group.
And that's what he did. Yeah, that's exactly what he did. Yeah, he was like, oh, I get it now.
That's good. Lisa, I this question keeps coming to my mind. I don't know. I'd just be curious how you'd answer it. We talked about, before we hit record, we were talking about how your book is very similar to the training and the work that we do at Gravity. And so there's a lot of resonance there for us. And I remember a conversation Matt and I were having one time with a church leader where we described kind of what Gravity does. And we work with churches and pastors and, leaders of all kinds. But, certain kinds of pastors aren't really interested in what we're doing. So we described it, I think, pretty well. And this pastor looked at us and just said like, oh, that sounds terrible. Like, he was sort of half joking, but you could tell it was like, I want no part of this. I'm not interested at all. And you had mentioned like your reticence to do this for a general Sunday school group, to sort of just introduce some content, just for anybody. And there's this call, right, to go deeper and to explore maybe wounds and to do like, you're calling people into difficult work, right? There's a sense in which like, this is hard. What do you, we don't ever dig up fields unless we're confident there's a treasure in the field, right? We don't sell everything we have to. So what would you say to someone who's like, this sounds like a lot of hard work. Like, why wouldn't I just go to a Sunday school class on Hebrews, and just learn some interesting stuff? Why would I join one of these groups? Why should I go on this journey of cultivating wholeness? What's the tov in it? What's the goodness in it? How would you answer that?
Well, we love hedonism, right? Isn't hedonism fun for a little bit? So Jesus says this crazy, crazy thing. He goes, take up your cross, and it's not to say we always have to like be self-flagellating and, oh no, everything sucks all the time. But Jesus actually says like, take up your cross, this symbol of death, right? He doesn't say, well, what's going to be? It's going to be parties all the time and lots of fun. But Jesus demands fidelity from us, but also that we should be expecting that this is going to cost us our life, and in the very least, it's going to cost us our giving our life to Christ. And that includes like all the difficult parts, all the parts that we're keeping to ourselves that we maybe foolishly think God doesn't know about, or maybe we're not going to open it up, but we're not going to open it up so that we don't see it. Of course, God already does. And as we open it up, I really think that some of these spiritual practices open us up to intimacy with God. As we get a sense of intimacy with God, we realize I can be vulnerable. It's going to be okay. I'm going to survive that. And then as we do that, we begin to heal. We begin to sense more love and connection with God. That is just in our perspective. It's always been there. And then that overflows to our other relationships.
Yeah.
So there is payoff, but it's not like a real easy transactional quick thing. It's like, okay, read this thing, then you get this payoff and everything's great with everybody else. It comes at a great cost of taking up your cross and dying to all those, insecurities or fears or something like that, and actually letting Christ take over. But the intimacy you get through that really essentially submission is so fruitful then, because you have all this empathy then for the people you're like, I know, I see that fear in that other person that I had. I get it. I know what that trauma, that spiritual trauma, I've been there. I know that fear. I know how you don't want to open up because it hurts and because you'll get hurt again, right?
Yeah.
And so I believe that God is always calling us to greater and greater intimacy. And in that intimacy comes healing through the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
And then that treasure, really, as you say, comes out in really sensing God's love for us, which is the truest reality.
Yeah.
And then that overflows into this back and forth of mutuality of love towards others, towards brothers and sisters in Christ, but towards everyone God has made.
This podcast is brought to you by Gravity Leadership Academy, our 10-month online training intensive for Christian leaders who want to root their life and leadership in God's love and bring lasting transformation to their culture. In Gravity Leadership Academy, you'll learn the real-life practicalities of how to notice God's presence and activity in and around you, so you can participate more fully in God's life and mission, and open up space for those around you to do so too. We've worked really hard to make this training in missional leadership practical and doable. To find out more about Gravity Leadership Academy, visit gravityleadership.com/academy.
One of our axioms, we were talking about, this book as part of our training. One of our axioms is it's all about communion. And communion is kind of the word that we use to talk about that reality, to say like that is the goodness. The goodness isn't like a donut or a candy bar or a lot of money. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm using silly examples of things, but there is this goodness of communion with God and with each other that is like the telos of our life. And so it's worth taking up the cross because, in a sense, the payoff, so to speak, is you get to live,
Yeah.
It also reminds me, I think I can't remember who I heard say this first. It's probably Dallas Willard. We quote him a lot on our
He's
podcast,
my homeboy.
I figured. But I think I heard him say, somebody said this one time, that the cross, taking up the cross is the easy yoke of Jesus. It's the same thing. The easy yoke of Jesus is the cross. And there's actually this blessedness in it. If you can get over the fact that you're dying, there's a blessedness in it.
Yeah. Well,
anyway.
I agree totally, because what's the alternative is the hell of self, right?
Yeah.
We are trapped in bondage in the hell of self, and God wants, and the gates of hell can't prevail against what God has in store for us. So it's right. Even though we're dying, we'll be resurrected with Christ as well. And so it's always about death, really, but it's also about new life. And so,
but that's not morbid, right? It's not. I think that's I don't know. It's a misconception that a lot of people have about people who are serious about spiritual practices and stuff.
Yeah.
Is that there's like this like morose morbidity, like the people just like feeling bad. And it's like, no, actually, if you understand this, these are people who've discovered what real life is, actually. And it just looks like death. It looks like death, and it is like death in one sense, but there's this kingdom, right? That's available to us, that's open to us, but it takes a little bit of faith to go like, maybe I'll try that. I'll take up my cross. That's not something I would have thought of, Jesus. Love my enemies.
Yeah.
I don't, but as you do it, you find yourself like participating in the life that God shares with us. So
well said.
Thanks for sharing that.
Lisa, I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier, and you touch on this in your book, and it's the word trauma. And you talked about like spiritual trauma, maybe some false notions of God, but then also there's other kinds of trauma as well that maybe don't originate or come from our religious or spiritual experiences, but come from other sources in our life. Most of us, I think, are just catching up to what is trauma and how does it inform who I am and the matrix or constellation of my emotions and my character, my choices, my responses. Could you just help us? How does this all fit together for you? Like, as you do spiritual direction, as you care for people, what role does your information, being informed on trauma, what role does that play?
Well, one of the biggest gaps, I'd just like to say this first off, in case I go too fast and forget it, because I think that one of the most important things I think we have to realize, and if someone feels like they've been traumatized, and how I'll say this is, you'll know that you have some issues with trauma if you feel triggered sort of frequently, if it affects your life and you feel like, and someone says trigger warning and you're like on edge, and someone, say you were raped and someone mentions something about abuse and you just get yanked back into it. But what is actually happening is your body is responding. You're a physical organism, okay? And so what a lot of times we don't realize, and I cover this in the book, and The Body Keeps the Score with Dr. Bessel van der Kolk is a great resource to kind of understand this so we can reintegrate.
Yeah.
In the West, we are in our heads and we think our problems are solved by reasoning and in our heads, but our brain that can be traumatized is not lingual. It is not chronological. It is essentially offline in those ways, and it's not reasonable. It's in a different section of the brain. So this part of the brain is instinctual, but it's extremely connected to the physical organism, which is why you'll get migraines, get stomach aches, you get GI issues. It's all connected to trauma. So when somebody gets triggered, sometimes they'll get a migraine, or sometimes they'll get GI issues or something like that. It's not separated. So when I am interacting with somebody, and again, I'm not a trained counselor. I am not a therapist. So I just want to say that outright. And I don't pretend to be, and I will refer someone right out when they have an issue that needs actual clinical help. But I can walk with someone as a friend. And I know from my experience being traumatized that I will shake, my voice will quiver. I have physical responses to my triggers. And that's what trauma is. And trauma can be in groups of people. It can be passed on generationally. It can be suffered by whole communities. And I'm speaking now, and I cover this in the book. It can be extremely suffered by non-white people in our country, and that affects lifespans. And that's why you will see people dying of COVID that are non-white dying first, dying sooner, dying more. So trauma makes a huge difference. And a lot of times people have us, let's do talk therapy. Let's talk it out. And I'm not saying that's worthless. I'm just saying it's not complete, because we're a complete organism. We don't have like a head and a heart as if these are totally different things. And so I just want to say that trauma is something we all go through in some regard. And that I go through, a lot of different kinds. Sometimes the trauma we have is something that we watched. Maybe we watched something terrible happen to a family member. Didn't happen to us, but our body actually had some kind of, there was a repercussion that happened in our actual organism. And so I want people to start understanding that trauma happens not in our brain somewhere where we can talk it out, although that can help, but the talking it out part has to happen after you feel safe in your own body.
Yeah. Do you find it, Lisa? I mean, as you're talking about this, I'm thinking about my own congregation and people that I'm in community with. And it seems as though just talking about trauma is triggering to people, and they're afraid. They're afraid to actually dig in. What would you say to those people? I mean, I know you kind of said that to Ben within community, but now if we're talking about like the stuff that's in there, I actually just recently spoke to a girl and I encouraged her to go to counseling and to actually And she was like, I don't want to dig in.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't want to go there.
Well, and the thing is, you do have to be somewhat ready. Some of the spiritual practices are bodily. So this is an entry point for people. And also, you can't force anybody to go where they don't want to go. And this is another reason why this is really important for leaders. Leaders will sometimes invite people in. Well, have they gone to counseling? Right? Okay.
Right.
So every leader has trauma. Have they done the work?
Yeah.
You can't take anybody you haven't been willing to go. So this is the thing, is that and this is why we have predatory leaders. This is why we have leaders that are blind to and don't have empathy, because they have not worked on their stuff. And so they have these blind spots. They wind up injuring and re-injuring the same people who've been injured. And so one of the things that it's just the absolute teeniest first step is you can begin to work with people with spiritual practice that are somewhat embodied. For instance, just a prayer walk, right? Like you can do it. We can walk with somebody, or they can walk on their own, and they can with that embodied walking, they can begin to pray about and just feel their feelings. And what they'll want to do immediately is boom, shut it down. No, shut it down. But the thing about is that you're integrating some of your feelings, and you're just holding your feelings for a little bit, and knowing that they're going to come up as soon as you start thinking a lot. They're going to come up, and just being kind of getting a little bit better with feeling them. And a lot of the spiritual practices that are non-verbal, that are non-image based, that are non-concept based, that just allow you to rest in God, these will sort of boil up to the surface when you have the time, when you are reflecting and you're just still. Then I believe that they kind of, what needs to rise to the surface does. And so if you just tell them, I like to tell people in advance, this will probably happen. This will probably happen, that something uncomfortable will come up. That's totally your normal. Everybody's got their crap, and your normal is going to come up. And so just feel it, and it's going to pass also, like a weather front. And then as they get more familiar with some of that, they might be like curious, and I wonder if we can explore this. And I would also say that, this is another thing where you don't go it alone. If you're unable to go into, you better have a Boy Scout with you, or a Scoutmaster or something, if you're going into the wilderness.
Right.
And it could be dangerous out there, right? You don't just be like, oh, I think I'm going to brave it out for a month, even though I've never gone camping. And I think that it's very good to validate people's fears, which are completely normal. If you've been traumatized, of course, when that comes up again, it's like trauma lives in the absolute present. It never goes to the past. It stays, it's outside of time. So it just stays right there. And so it's just, that is totally normal that people will be like, not ready. And of course not, because it hurts and it's scary. But as people know that you're there, that you are providing presence, and you're saying, yeah, me too, I have some stuff, and we can get through this together at any speed. There is no like, okay, by next week, we're going to just any speed. And they realize you're safe and you're flawed. It is just walking with people. And if they never get to any big milestones, that's okay. Just be gentle, a gentle shepherd. And I think that this is where we earn trust, right? We don't just be like, well, I got this degree, of course you could trust me, So I would say that everybody's going to be afraid. That is the most normal. If somebody isn't afraid, then they're kind of a faker, I would say.
Right.
So.
I was just in a group recently where someone said, I have 3 things I want to share, and they shared 2. And then I was like, but you said you had 3. Is there a third one? And they looked at me and they said, I'm kind of judging in my head whether or not this is a safe enough environment for me to be that vulnerable. And I was like, thank you for that honesty, right? And then they did actually dive in and share that third thing. And I was so proud of them for going for it. And
such an honor too, to hear their thing.
Yes, I felt, So thank you for that. That's good.
I Lisa, appreciate that so much. I feel often intimidated. I was trained for certain things, and I'm waking up to stuff that I have no training in and no knowledge of, and I feel overwhelmed. And then I feel like, well, if I can't deal with trauma, like, and a lot of people are waking up to trauma, like, what good can I do? Like, as a Christian leader, do I have to outsource all my work to paid professionals? And one of the things I appreciate about this book is there are you trace the development of meeting God in these interior places throughout the church history, and you also give us snapshots, or actually like little doorways into the wisdom from the church history of how to practice and how to get in our bodies, which, like you were saying, is where trauma lives. As you think through like the writing of this book, has there been a practice that you name in this book that has been most helpful or central to your own spiritual life?
Well, I really appreciate just silence, but if somebody is not used to that, then they really need some